Hey there guys, it's your good pal Wiggly, and welcome back to more Let's Play Metroid Zero Mission. This is the bonus video where we're going to talk about things like cut content and the original game, and just show off some cool stuff related to the game. Yes, I 100%ed the game on hard to show off something specific. Hard mode is something that I didn't really talk about much. When you beat the game on normal, you can start a new game plus, which I mentioned, where you are able to see on the map a checklist of how many items are left in that area. And you can use that new game plus to play hard mode. Hard mode is not quite as bad as it sounds, but it's still pretty rough. I maintain my opinion that Metroid Zero Mission is fantastic when it's remaking Metroid. The new content is rough, especially the fight with Mecha Ridley and the escape from Chizodia. I think those two black space pirates at the very end are bullshit, especially now after hard mode. Something I neglected to mention about Mecha Ridley, by the way, is the fact that his difficulty actually scales with your completion percentage. If you have 100%, I believe his health and attack output triple. On hard mode, if you have max health like I did here, a single arm swipe takes half your health. Two of those and you're dead. And that makes it very difficult to save enough energy to fight the two black space pirates at the end. You might be wondering why it doesn't quite look 100%ed, and that's because on hard mode, even though all of the items are in the same locations, they give you less. So on hard mode, energy tanks give you 49 health instead of 99, leaving you with only 6 full energy tanks instead of 12. Super missile expansions only give you 1 super missile, leaving you with 15 at the end of the game. Power bomb expansions only give you 1 power bomb, leaving you with 9 at the end of the game. And missile expansions only give you 2 missiles per expansion, leaving you with, I believe, 100. If we go into options mode, your reward for beating hard mode is the sound test, which is an okay reward, I suppose. See, here's Norfair. As I said before, if you beat the game at all, you get to play the original Metroid. Metroid Fusion Link. I'm pretty disappointed because I wanted to show off using an emulator what this does, but I'm just going to have to tell you because nobody can seem to get it to work on Visual Boy Advance Link, and I don't have Game Boy Advances to do this with. Metroid Fusion Link gives you the ability to link Metroid Zero Mission to another Game Boy Advance playing Metroid Fusion. And what it does is it allows you to view all of the ending images from Metroid Fusion in this game's gallery. It gives you a separate option in between these two that says Metroid Fusion Gallery. And it's really cool because not only do you get to see the ending images, but there are new ending images that we didn't get to see because they were Japanese exclusive, because the Japanese game had a difficulty setting and the American version did not. So you get to see a couple really neat images. I'm not going to show them here because I want to talk about those at the end of my Metroid Fusion Let's Play when I get around to that. But I will put a link in the video description showing you everything there is to show about the Metroid Fusion Link if you want to see it for yourself running on Metroid Zero Mission. I think the last thing that I want to mention about Zero Mission is 2 things of cut content that were planned to be in the game but just didn't happen. You actually were supposed to be able to toggle items off and on. I think they decided to omit that specifically because the game is perfectly beatable without it. It doesn't really harm you to not be able to turn the ice beam or the long beam off. So I can understand the removal, though it would have been nice to have the option like Super Metroid has. And as I also mentioned during, I think, episode 1, there was a cut Crocomire fight where the coding is just completely messed up. All he can do is do the idle animation, but here is these sprites. There is a ROM hack that makes Crocomire into a boss fight, but I don't think it's how they intended it to be. And with that, I think that we should head into talking about the original game. I already showed off the different endings of Metroid Zero Mission in the finale, but the original NES game also had different endings depending on how long you took to beat the game. These endings are only based on how long you took and not completion percentage. The first ending is the one that you get for beating the game in over 10 hours, which shows Samus looking back and with her arm covering her face, very disappointed in you. The second ending, which you get for beating the game anywhere between 5 to 10 hours, has Samus waving at you and congratulating you on doing a good job. The third ending, which you get for beating the game between 3 to 5 hours, has Samus looking at the camera with her helmet off, proving once and for all to the world that women can be badass too. The fourth ending, which you get for beating the game between 1 to 3 hours, has Samus without her suit. This is technically the first iteration of the Zero suit, though I prefer her blue suit to this pinkish leotard. You can get one more ending for beating the game in under an hour, and that is super hard to do, but the reward is well worth it. You get to see a Metroid in a bikini. Just kidding, you get to see Samus in a bikini. I just wanted to make a joke about how people thought that Samus's name was Metroid in the 80s, because that's the name of the game. Thank you so much to Paul Draws Art for drawing that image specifically for this video. He's a good friend of mine and his art is fucking awesome. Check out his link in the description. This image is hilarious. One more thing I wanted to mention before you move on to the really cool stuff, not that this isn't cool because it is pretty damn cool, you can actually play as suitless Samus through the entirety of the original game if you start the game again. After beating the NES version only. The Famicom Disk System version does not include this. Speaking of the Famicom Disk System version, even though you unfortunately can't play as suitless Samus in it, which is super lame, the Famicom Disk System version, in my personal opinion, is in fact the better version of the game because of a couple differences. The first and probably the most important difference is the fact that the Famicom Disk System version actually had the ability to save, like Zelda 2. I have absolutely no idea why this isn't in the North American release, because it would have been a really great thing to have, and I think that the game would have been a lot better for it. Another really important difference to mention is that because of the fact that it's on a floppy disk and not on an NES cartridge, it lags a lot less. There's a lot of slowdown in the NES version that just flat out isn't present at all in the FDS version, and coming from somebody who's beaten both versions, I can attest that the FDS version just feels a lot better, and I wouldn't recommend playing the NES version over it. One thing that may or may not turn you off about the FDS version, though, is that because the Famicom Disk System uses a different sound chip, the songs and the sound effects, a lot of them sound different. Some of them, in my opinion, sound better, some of them sound worse, but I'll play a couple of them for you now so you can gauge for yourself whether you like it or not. We already talked about the cut content in Zero Mission, but I also wanted to talk about cut content in the original as well, such as these unused Samus sprites used to simulate Samus moving left instead of right, but instead of having the arm cannon actually flip to the other side like these sprites show, they just mirrored her sprite when she's moving left. To save space, I'm not sure why. They already had these sprites fully made, and that's kind of weird to me, but it's cool that these exist. Also, something that was in the original game and not reused in Zero Mission is the fact that there was like a fake Kraid that was super weak and died in one hit, to into a missile to kind of fake you out and make you think that you beat Kraid when Kraid's actually a lot more difficult. And they also do this in Super Metroid. But there's also an unused fake Ridley that fully functions in the NES version, but it's just not in the game. It also dies in one hit, and that's hilarious. Next up, I wanted to talk about some passwords you could put into the NES version. Even though we didn't have the save system that the FDS version had, we had a password system used for continues. And some pretty cool stuff could be done with these, such as if you put in Narpus Sword and a bunch of zeros, which it probably actually says NAR password, you will start the game in Brinstar with all of the power-ups except for the Wave Beam and the Varia suit, but if you go left, the Morph Ball is actually the Varia suit for some reason, and also you are completely invincible as far as I can tell. I ran into a bunch of enemies and my health never went below 30, so that's pretty cool. Next up is the infamous Justin Bailey password, which you just put in Justin Bailey and a bunch of dashes. Nobody knows what Justin Bailey means. I couldn't find a definitive answer onto who Justin Bailey was or why it was put in as a password. There are multiple explanations, but none of them seem to be confirmed as far as I can tell. But anyway, if you put in this password, you start the game as Suitless Samus in Norfair with 5 empty energy tanks, full missiles, the Wave Beam, Long Beam, Morph Ball Bombs, Jump Boots, and Screw Attack. So that's pretty helpful if you want to just hop into the game fully powered up. Or, if you want to just play the entire game suitless without having to beat the game first, you can just put in this passcode, and you will just start the game without many power-ups in suitless Samus form, which I like to do a lot. Pretty much every time I play the game, I do this now. Next up is a really strange one to me. If you put in Oddish, Tauros, Mewtwo, Vulpix into the password system, you'll spawn in Norfair as suitless Samus with a bunch of power-ups, but no Varia suit. I have no idea why these Pokemon names work in this password system, even though this game predates Pokemon by like 10 years. This next one is really funny. If you put in Mother Brain, fucking toast. You'll start in Torian with 156 missiles, 5 energy tanks, and all of the power-ups in the game except for the Wave Beam, Long Beam, and Morph Ball. If you make your way all the way down to Mother Brain, which is difficult to do since you can't escape from Metroids with Morph Bombs, you'll see that Mother Brain is already dead, and you can just run to the end of the game at that point. And I think it's hilarious that the password actually reflects what happens. Next up, if you put in Dragon Ball Z all capitalized and then Dragon Ball Z with only the D and B capitalized, you'll start in Norfair with 172 missiles, 5 energy tanks, only 30 units of health, and a bunch of power-ups. I don't know why this password works either. Last, but most certainly not least, if you put in Engage Ridley, motherfucker, on most versions, it'll crash the game or reset it to the title screen, like it crashes my NES Classic here. But on 3-pin cartridges or on some emulators, it'll put you on the first screen of Brinstar with a super glitched out interface, and you can't scroll left or right, so you're just trapped there suitless. In this last portion of the video, I want to spend some time taking a look at some cool art that I found while researching stuff about the game. This is all official art, it's not fan-made stuff, don't worry. I'm not just like stealing other people's art, but I wanted to show off some cool stuff, such as here's the NES Metroid box art. I'm sure a majority of us are familiar with this one, but I also wanted to point out that the PAL version box art just looks a lot cooler in my opinion, and even cooler is the Famicom Disk System box art. And further proving my point that the Famicom Disk System version, other than the password thing, is the best version of the game. All the rest of the art we're going to look at comes from the North American Instruction Manual, because there's just a lot of great art that I adore in this thing. Such as, in the plot synopsis section, there's this picture of what I can only assume is a Galactic Federation soldier fighting what they assumed a space pirate looked like, since there was no actual design for the space pirates yet, because they don't appear in NES Metroid. Next up is the fact that the NES Instruction Manual calls the Morph Ball the Maru Mari, which is Japanese for to roll into a ball. Here's an incredibly unhelpful map that they included in the NES Instruction Manual. It blurs out all the areas that you would have really needed help on finding, and that sucks. Here's something fun. If you look in the section where it talks about Norfair for a little bit, you get this funny image of Samus with her ass on fire, but also, if you read the text, it says, if Samus falls into the fire sea, his energy seeps away. The entire manual calls Samus he. I have no idea if it's intentional just to like preserve the spoiler if you beat the game in under a certain amount of time to be like, whoa, Samus is a girl, or if the writers for this manual genuinely didn't know and just assumed that Samus was male. There's actually a lot of great art of Samus in this manual, such as this one of Samus looking at the camera, and I really like the way this one looks. There's this one of Samus thinking, this one of her holding a video game controller to explain the mechanics to you. Here's one of her firing a super spiky missile. Here's a really cool one of her firing the wave beam and taking down a scree. And here's one of her laying a bomb and blowing up a zoomer. Probably my favorite piece of art in the entirety of the manual is this one of Samus up top avoiding some enemies with a bunch of really odd looking Metroids down at the bottom. They're like super like squishy like jellyfish, which I suppose they would be, but also at the bottom they have tentacles and not like the teeth thing that you usually see them with. And the drawn sprite for the enemy entry for the Metroids also has tentacles instead of teeth, even though in-game they very clearly have teeth. Total side note, because I thought it was funny and weird, the section about Brinstar calls the acid water. Okay. Something you may have noticed is that Kraid looks really different in the NES version, and here's some art of him in like high detail, and I think this is the funniest thing in the world. He looks like a fucking troll, and it's the best thing ever to me. Ridley, on the other hand, in the manual is like a shade of blue, and his head is like grotesque and weird. I don't know why this is, because that's not what he looks like in the game at all, but yeah. Here's a picture of both Ridley and Kraid, completely fucked up beyond belief, standing side by side. There's actually no art of Mother Brain in the manual because they wanted to keep it a secret as to what the final boss looked like, but here is what Mother Brain looks like in the NES version, and I think this looks really, really cool. The last few things that I want to look at are a couple enemy portraits in the manual that I just think look really, really neat, such as the Rinka, the little fireball enemies that chase you during the Mother Brain and Torian sections. As I said in the Let's Play, the NES version of the manual kind of implies that they're alive, which is really weird to me because they don't look it. Next up is the fire seahorse enemy that is called Dragon. I just think this art looks really cool and dynamic, and like I love the grotesque like realism of it. I think it looks sweet. The faster version of the Ripper looks like he's gonna mess you up. He's like a fucking engine with fire spewing out the back, and this looks sweet as hell. And the final piece of art that I want to leave you on is the enemy portrait for the Nova, which are those fire enemies in Norfair. I think this looks super cool and edgy, and I like that they made a different version for both recolors. And I think that just about covers everything I wanted to talk about in the Metroid Zero Mission bonus video. I had a lot of fun recording this Let's Play, even if the finale was a massive pain and I shouldn't have done it in one sitting. I want to thank you guys for the support. I'm glad to be back and making Let's Plays in full force now. If there's anything that I missed in this bonus video, please feel free to discuss it in the comments. I'd love to learn more about this franchise that I love, love, love so much, and I only grow to love more every game that I play or replay. So yeah. I've been Guildmaster Wiggly. Thank you so much for enjoying the Metroid Zero Mission series, and I can't wait to see you guys for Metroid Samus Returns.